Hello everyone, this is part 17 of What If Naruto Had a Secret, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Location: Forest of Death, pre-dawn of the third day. Naruto grunted, rolling over on the sleeping mat, burying his face into the jacket out of pillow. His face contorted into a grimace of displeasure as sweat beaded on his forehead, and he rolled back over to stare at the brightening sky. He could hear his heart pounding in his ears and the ever-present phantom feeling of anger and fear. Concentrating on his breathing, he tried to calm down, hoping that he could get some sleep. It seemed hopeless. After all, he'd been up all night tossing and turning. It was like he was being chased by some invisible predator, unable to rest for a minute. He took 3 deep breaths and blinked rapidly to try to adjust his eyes to the dim darkness but couldn't. Closing his eyes once more, he sighed, preparing to attempt to sleep yet again, only to grimace as phantom pain flitted across his mind. Then, suddenly, he exploded to his feet, clutching at his end with one hand, mind-numbing pain racing through him, and the knowledge that Anko was hurt and in trouble. He tried to move only to stumble and collapse to his knees, staring sightlessly as a dark liquid dripped from his nose to splatter against the ground. Pain. Orochimaru. Naruto didn't know how, didn't know why, but there was no doubt in his mind that Anko was fighting Orochimaru. That she was losing, and that he had to help her. Struggling to his feet, he darted into the forest, his own anger overriding any pain he felt, any fear. All that mattered was that he help Anko, that the bastard who was hurting her paid. Without realizing it, his speed doubled and then tripled, leaving behind a wake of broken branches. Anko could feel him all around her, even over the pain of her broken ribs and dislocated shoulder. He was toying with her, she knew it, he loved to toy with people. Sick, perverted bastard, he was just getting his jollies before he K her. Anko could stop running and deprive him of that thrill, but she had to keep buying time until Itachi and his team arrived. Taking a running jump, she plunged 20 feet, focusing desperately through her pain. Sparing a brief moment, she wondered where the hell Itachi was. After all, her 2 escorts had been sent off several hours ago. Suddenly, a branch was beneath her, and she landed with a crouch, the jarring impact making her wince and stumble slightly. Getting back to her feet, she froze, eyes widening in fear and surprise at finding Orochimaru already there. He was casually leaning against the tree, a twisted smile on his face and yellow eyes glinting in the dim light. How nice of you to join me. Anko felt a shiver run up her spine, whether from fear or anger she didn't know, but it was obvious to her that Orochimaru was even stronger than when he had left. Still, she wouldn't roll over and cower. The days when she did that for him were long gone. Are you tired already? I think you used to have more stamina. Well now, the Sannin said, pushing off the tree slightly. There's the viper I remember. Though, I agree, I did used to have more stamina. I think it's my partner, however, that's not stimulating me. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm not a prepubescent brat. Anko hissed, eyes narrowing before she threw her hand out to launch a hail of kunai at the twisted man, only to be forced into jumping as his tongue whipped toward her. Dodging that, she managed to fire off the kunai an instant before the tongue flicked around and grasped her wrist, yanking her off her feet and her into the branch. Stunned, Anko shook her head, looking up at the so far unfazed Orochimaru. Recovering, she twisted her free hand, concentrating before her hand out. A second later, amid hissing and rustling clothes, snakes came hurtling from her sleeve and fangs first into the startled-looking man. Anko couldn't help but smirk as she yanked him off his feet and then slung him around to into the tree. Sorry, sensei, but I'm not that easy anymore. You'll always be Ayers, Orochimaru started to retort, only to widen his eyes as Anko his hand into the tree with hers while plunging a kunai through both of their hands. Hey, I'm going to borrow your hand. Anko gritted out, reaching out to grasp his other hand before freezing as the figure melted into a black liquid. A replacement, My, not that bad, but still a bit pathetic. Orochimaru said from behind her. Only just now realizing that was my shadow. Konoha surely has fallen if they have to depend on ninja like you, my cast-offs. Twisting around, Anko stared in surprise at the man, then screamed out in pain as her cursed seal exploded into activity. With a sick L sound, the kunai L through her hand, as Anko collapsed once more, clutching at the seal on her end desperately. Kukukuku, still loud as ever. I only hope the boy I met earlier isn't the same, Orochimaru taunted as he crouched down. Now that I look closer. You seem jealous. Well, I can understand that, I suppose, since your looks have gone downhill. Quote. I am going to KU. Anko hissed, only to freeze as he reached out to stroke her cheek in that hauntingly familiar way of a lover. Anko growled and turned her head, doing the only thing she could at the moment, biting his hand. Oh my, are you feeling that frisky? Orochimaru taunted, reaching out with his free hand to grab her jaw and free his hand. Just for old time's sake, I'll use my tongue. He licked his lips, his massive and distorted tongue snaking towards her. A second later, she was sent crashing into another tree, the tongue squeezing her end before retracting. Kukuku. So, was it good for you? Coughing up head feeling light, Anko pushed herself onto her hands and knees. Her arms trembling, she almost collapsed, but instead she struggled her way back to her feet. Panting heavily, she looked up at him, giving him a grin. F4 never was your thing. Ino woke, a chill racing through her from the cool morning air. Stretching with a silent yawn, the Kunoiki s her hand around to grab the sheath of her sword and then sat up. Rubbing at her eyes tiredly, Ino muttered to herself as her mind slowly sped back up from sleep. When it had, a heavy weight seemed to settle into her sea, the memory of yesterday's case still fresh. It had been bad enough yesterday that she hadn't been able to concentrate at all, forcing them to camp early. If it hadn't been for that, they probably could have reached the central tower last night. Every night in the forest was another night that a team could take their spot, which meant that if they failed she would be to blame. Guilt welling up inside her, Ino groaned, covering her eyes, unable to help the urge to cry. She was too young for this pressure, and especially to deal with having taken a life. Then, dimly, she thought about the fact that Naruto was the same age as her and he was dealing with it. How? Frowning, she blinked and looked at his sleeping mat, wondering if she could ask him, only to find it empty. Ino blinked, then slowly climbed to her feet and approached, wondering what was going on. Maybe he had gone to the bathroom. Or was out hunting. Ino shook her head, knowing better. He would have left a cage bunchen like last time, which didn't leave too many options, really. Ino felt her heart starting to hammer against her ribs, an unnamed fear welling up inside her. If he had been attacked and eyes darting around nervously, her mind began to play one gruesome scene after another until she began marching around the clearing, turning this way and that, looking for some sign of what had happened to the blonde. Naruto. Ino cried out suddenly, cupping her hands to her mouth. There was a slight echo, and then, after it faded, nothing. Taking a deeper breath, she shouted once more, and, when that provided no answer, she attempted it over and over. Ino-san, Shino said, sitting up from his sleeping mat. It may not be wise to be shouting in such a fascio. Naruto-kun's missing. Ino snapped, rounding on the boy with enough hostility to make him flinch. All his stuff is here, but he's just gone. Ino-san, it is possible that he is just out hunting or using the bathroom. Shino offered calmly, climbing to his feet so that they were at eye level. Ino sighed heavily, folding her arms under her as she frowned. Do you really think that he'd just go off on his own? Ino asked. Like, he left one of those cage bunchens of his yesterday when he went off. True, Shino allowed, hesitance in his voice. However, I doubt anything too serious occurred to him. But it's possible. Ino snapped. He is the #1 genin. The #1 Konoha genin, Ino corrected in aggravation. Another village's #1 could have ambushed him or. Ino paled, reaching up to cup her mouth. Ino-san, please get a hold of your emotions, Shino said in what passed as annoyance for him. This emotional attachment you've formed with Naruto-san. What are you talking about? Ino asked, fixing her gaze on the boy. You've grown emotionally attached to Naruto, Shino explained tiredly. Due to the fact that you experienced a semi-traumatic event yesterday, namely the taking of a life. The attachment and your refusal to let the event go is impairing your judgment. First off, Ino growled, closing the gap between them, excuse me for not being a robot. And, second off, it's called being a teammate to be, emotionally attached, to each other. Naruto is our teammate, Ino snapped, jabbing Shino in the sea with her finger. He may have a few problems, but at least he really cares about us. So, we are going to go look for him, we will find him, and if you don't help, then may the Amatsukami help you. Someone should wait for him, Shino started to say, only to pause at Ino's fixed glare. Sighing, he held an arm out, allowing several bugs to escape into the air in different directions. After a moment, he nodded and gestured to the right. I'll take point. They say Naruto-san went this way around dawn. Ducking a feeble S at his face, Orochimaru just barely bit back his annoyance. This fight had dragged on longer than he intended for a brief distraction. After all, he was on a schedule, and the leader of the Akatsuki was rather annoying about such things. Leaning back from another S, he lashed out, one hand grabbing her arm while the other grasped her T in a vice-like grip. I'm sorry to say this, but we have to stop. I'm running behind, Orochimaru said, locking eyes with hers. It would all be over now, and he could continue on his way and meet up with the intended target. So focused was he on his former student and his meeting for the day, he barely noticed the feeling of lances of chakra S into him. His mind supplied the name of the technique almost instantly, Kanashibari no Jutsu, a split second before his eyes caught the movement of something orange hurtling at him. Needless to say, Orochimaru was impressed. The impact from the blow wrenched his arm out of its socket, allowing Anko to collapse to the ground in a heap. Orochimaru, however, was busy thinking about the one responsible for that attack, namely the orange-clad ninja who was crouching slightly, with familiarly wild blonde hair and odd whisker marks on his face. An Inuzuka. No, they had darker hair and never went anywhere without a dog. But he was wearing a Konoha forehead protector. Curious. More important, however, was the fact that the Kanashibari was already fading. Obviously, this mysterious child had very little practice in applying it. Still, it had been enough to get one good shot in, and the Sannin prepared to compliment the blonde, only to be caught short as the boy shifted his weight and charged at him with surprising speed. Orochimaru was not a Sannin, nor an S-ranked criminal, for nothing, and he neatly dodged the incoming attack. In that moment, however, he found himself staring into the eyes of AK, which piqued his interest. Then, the boy rounded on the ball of his foot, shifted his weight, and came within a hair's breadth of hitting him in the sea with a kunai. Leaping away from the boy, the older ninja paused. The way the boy had shifted his weight was far too familiar to be coincidence. Kakukaku. You are a spirited one, Orochimaru said, eyes narrowing as he felt the boy's intent growing. Do you have a name? Uzumaki Naruto, the blonde spat, crouching slightly. I'm going to KU. Oh, the Sannin asked conversationally, eyes widening in mock surprise. Could I ask why, exactly, you want to do that? Because, Naruto said, his hands shooting forward to hurl a barrage of kunai at him, you hurt Nichan. Orochimaru thought about retorting, but decided instead to study how the blonde had thrown the weapons. With that, the K-look, and the way he moved, there was now very little doubt in his mind that this Naruto had been trained in the heavy style, unrefined though it seemed. It was obvious that Anko had been playing sensei, which meant they were connected with the Kinbaku, as that was the only reason for this boy to show up from nowhere. With a quick shunshin out of the line of attack, he grinned, deciding to share one of his favorite attacks with the boy, Shikumi no Jutsu. He was feeling sentimental, after all, and this Naruto was, in a way, his grandchild. It took very little effort to launch, as always, it was so easy to capture people in his K intent. He was so busy gloating about this, Orochimaru, the S-class criminal, made a very foolish mistake. Yes, the Shikumi no Jutsu had, until this point in time, worked for the most part flawlessly. However, this was the first time he had ever tried it on a genin who had accepted his eventual death so thoroughly that he simply ignored the jutsu and continued charging full speed at him, a wordless scream of rage echoing in the air as he jumped and came down with a kunai aimed at the Sannin's face. Orochimaru, due to sheer experience and reflexes, realized his mistake and, despite his shock, managed to lift his arms in an X-block, which resulted in the force of the blow sending the infamous traitor skidding backwards slightly, his arm now held by a blade. Eyes wide, Orochimaru looked at the blonde across from him in something akin to horror. No genin had ever shrugged the Shikumi off so completely, let alone actually managed to hurt him. Not in all of his 50 years. Part of Orochimaru, the part that had kept him alive for so long, told him that he needed to kill this child now before he became an even bigger threat. The other part, the part that had made him feared and led him to create so many forbidden jutsu, said that should leave him alive to see how he evolved. Orochimaru was so lost in his thoughts and musings that he nearly missed the blonde charging at him yet again. Narrowing his yellow eyes, Orochimaru watched the boy as what little grace that had been present earlier was tossed out the window. It seemed that he would have to forget about his schedule. This child was proving far more interesting than he had first expected. The incoming attack proved silly, and he struck out at the boy, expecting it to be a cage bunshin because that would be an obvious choice for this child's apparent skill level. He was wrong, as the Naruto he hit became a log, and he grinned slightly, amused that a child could move so quickly as to replace himself against him. A second later, he heard the familiar whistling of kunai and turned to see a whole storm of them sailing at him, each fluttering a tag behind them, thrown by at least 20 clones from each direction. Jumping and weaving, he danced away from the exploding blades, looking around in curiosity. He was not surprised that there was being herded away from Anko, but he was surprised when he suddenly sensed more kunai from behind him. Sparing a glance over his shoulder, he raised an eyebrow at the sheer number of clones and kunai hurtling at him. Unexpected, Orochimaru admitted before jumping onto the branch of a tree to avoid the massive explosion that rocked the ground. A second later, he spotted what had to be the real Naruto moving around in the trees above him and extended his arm to grasp the boy and yank him down. He nearly sensed the trap too late and just barely had time to release the Naruto he was holding before it exploded. "Here I come, you bastard!" One of the Narutos shouted, and the entire horde came rushing toward him from below, the sides, and the tree tops. It seemed he was utterly surrounded and defeated. Orochimaru, however, smirked and oh so casually merged with the tree he was in, allowing it to absorb the damage for him. When the attacks finally tapered off, Orochimaru emerged partially from the tree to keep them in one area. Then, with a shunshin, he was behind them and expelling air and chakra, vaporizing the tree and all of those clones with a massive ball of flames. "Kukukaku, Anko had a rather vicious student," Orochimaru said in delight. It had been interesting to see a genin already at that level. "Kuten, Senpu no Koku yo." A voice from behind, distinctly Naruto, suddenly shouted, and Orochimaru turned in time to see a large whirlwind of leaves heading toward him. Orochimaru felt surprise course through him, knowing that technique, and knowing that it was rather dangerous since the edges of those leaves would be razor sharp. "Kaiten, Hosenka no Jutsu." Orochimaru shouted, spitting forth multiple balls of fire at the whirlwind and blonde. The blonde dodged to the left, kicking off a tree for an extra burst of speed and came hurtling toward him. Which was exactly what Orochimaru wanted since in that instant of the blonde being airborne he formed the Taurus seal and took a breath. Futon, Daitopper. Naruto's face showed surprise, then determination, as he created his own Taurus seal. Futon, Daitopper. The resulting clash between the two forces of wind forced Orochimaru to cover his face and slide backward, even as trees bent and some even snapped in half. Debris and dust was kicked into the air, and above it all was the screaming rush of howling wind. As it is, the snake Sannin relaxed his guard, highly impressed at the result of that clash. But, where he had weathered the attack unscathed, Naruto was sprawled against a tree trunk, dazed and battered. Which meant it was time to end this. He had wasted too much time and effort on this already. His hand forward, he grinned maliciously. Senator Harshu. A second later, a dozen or snakes shot forward, twisting through the air to wrap around and bite into the blonde's Uik. Naruto screamed in surprise and pain. Orochimaru, however, yanked his arm around, pulling the boy into the air before into one of the few remaining trees. The scream and bee that elicited was repeated as Orochimaru moved his arm around him, hitting everything in sight until, at last, the boy's body went limp. Releasing the blonde so that he landed on the ground with a dull thump, the Sannin chuckled. Turning to continue on his way, he paused, seeing Anko using a tree for support, bee leaking from her various wounds and, most importantly, glaring at him in impotent hatred. "Kukuku, what's with those hateful eyes?" When she didn't answer, he just grinned wider, amused at this. Then his amusement as he felt a large amount of wicked chakra building behind him. Seeing the look of horror on Anko's face only made him more nervous. Turning despite his better judgment, he spotted the source of the chakra, which was actually quite obvious, since tendrils of chakra were twisting and coiling in the air as it wrapped around the blonde. Naruto, chakra boiling, pushed himself to his hands and knees and then, with a growl, lifted his head to stare at Orochimaru with crimson eyes and elongated irises. The whisker marks on his cheeks were darkening and widening. Even his various wounds healed at an alarming rate. This, Orochimaru said in amazement an instant before the blonde shot towards him with inhuman speed. Orochimaru just barely caught his arm in time to keep the claws from sinking all the way into his sea. I'm going to you. Naruto hissed and then, without warning, lashed out with his other hand, flaying the Sannin's cheek an instant before Orochimaru sent him hurtling away. Clutching at his cheek and sea, applying what healing jutsu he could, Orochimaru suddenly felt an icy certainty race through him, and it had only one word. Jinchuriki. Anko wished she could look away, wished that she could turn off the Kinbaku no Jutsu, but she couldn't. What was coming across the Kinbaku was too powerful to force it into silence, and watching the fight in front of her was too much like art not to watch. Naruto tore his way through a series of Tsuchi Bunshin, clawed his way through a Doton, Ritsudo Tensho, and scattered a Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu with a chakra-infused scream. Nothing Orochimaru threw at the blonde seemed to work. It was almost like Naruto was an unstoppable juggernaut. Part of her hoped and prayed that Naruto could KO Orochimaru, she wanted that desperately. Another part of her just hoped that the anger, hate, pain and dark fury would stop coming across the link between them. The vast majority of her, however, hated herself for not being able to do anything to help Naruto. Her body had been pushed to the breaking point when the blonde had arrived. The pain was too much for her even to push through. Indeed, it had taken her the majority of the fight between Orochimaru and Naruto just to get her body to stand. As it was, if she forced herself into this fight, in this condition, she would get herself, and possibly Naruto, So, all she could do at the moment was watch. There was a clash. Orochimaru had been to slow, and now he was B. Another clash, now it was Naruto who was B for the moment, then another and another, a rapid exchange of blows. Anko almost didn't see it, but she did, and she tried to move, but her legs gave out, and it was too late. Suddenly, Naruto was being held aloft, his upper body bound tightly by an elongated arm and a tongue that was wrapped around his T and holding his jacket up. The look on Orochimaru's face told her just how painful and how much of a struggle it was to hold the boy in that position. Naruto was kicking and struggling and, inch by inch, he was forcing his way free, the odd design on his stomach looking as if it was burning its way through his skin. Orochimaru flashed his free hand through a series of complicated seals before the tips began to glow. Gogyo o Fuin. Orochimaru shouted, his glowing fingers into Naruto's stomach. There was a flash of light, and the chakra flickered and then but Naruto continued to struggle. Orochimaru seemed annoyed by that development and formed another seal before smacking his palm against the boy's forehead. Shunman Fuin. Anko watched in silence as the blonde's head lolled slightly, as consciousness was forced into a state of sleep. Naruto was at the man's mercy, they were all alone. And Orochimaru wasn't letting the blonde go. Panic and fear welled up inside her, and she didn't realize what she was doing until she was within an arm's reach of the two. A second later, Orochimaru's hand into her cheek with enough force to send her skidding along the ground before crashing against a tree. Looking up, hurting in countless ways, she stretched her hand out feebly toward Naruto. This didn't go unnoticed by Orochimaru, who glanced at her and then at the blonde he was holding aloft, before chuckling darkly. You should thank me, Anko-chan, the Sannin said, casually taking one of the kunai from Naruto's weapons pouch and pressing it against the unconscious Naruto's T. Not everyone gets to experience death twice. Anko tried to think of something, anything, to stop the man, when he suddenly dropped Naruto like a hot potato and leaped into the trees. A moment later, 3 Anbu came hurtling into the clearing, one following Orochimaru, and the other 2 stopping. Anko-sama, the one wearing the bird mask said in surprise. We've been looking for you all over the place. You should have waited for backup, it was very irresponsible. Forcing her way into a sitting position, she glared at the figure speaking, while his partner knelt and began healing her. Right. If you guys weren't so damn slow, a genin wouldn't have had to try and fight that bastard. I'm impressed he managed to live, Bird Mask said, kneeling over him, his own hands glowing blue. Ha, he's already healing. Well, yeah, Anko muttered, her breathing easier now that Bear Mask had finished working on her lungs and ribs. I mean, what with him having a healing bloodline and all. Sweet Kami, what kind of idiots are they letting into the Anbu nowadays? He's new, Bear Mask said with a chuckle. Itachi-sama doesn't like him much either, but he is pretty good. More importantly, what exactly happened he? Naruto-kun. A new voice shouted as Ino came hurtling into the clearing, followed by a reluctant-looking male companion. Oh great, it's the princess and the bugger, Anko muttered, pushing herself to her feet despite her body's protests. Ha, Ino managed, looking around in surprise. Anko-sensei. What happened to Naruto-kun? I don't have time for this, Anko muttered, while trying desperately to think of a story that could convince both the two genin and the ANBU, and keep that evil power she had witnessed secret. Alright, this is the short version. I was on patrol with a couple of idiots, we spotted an S-ranked criminal. I went after him while I sent the idiots to get backup. My little skirmish with the criminal brought us near your camp, and Naruto, who was apparently out hunting, decided to try and help after I got hurt. Well, that was stupid of him, Bird Mask said blandly, finishing up the healing of the blonde. A genin versus an S-ranked criminal is S. Sure. Anko agreed, noting the anger flashing in Ino's eyes as she glared at the Anbu. That's why Naruto managed to hold him off while I recovered, right? That's why Orochimaru unleashed such a terrible chakra against a genin and not me, right? She has a point, Bear Mask said, sounding amused. Besides, this is Uzumaki Naruto. I think he could do it with surprise. But, eventually, experience and skill would win out. Which is when you guys arrived, Anko said, glaring at them. I still want to know why it took you an entire day. Because the recruits you sent weren't very clear on your location, Bear Mask explained. We had to comb the whole forest until we felt the mass of chakra being unleashed over here. But Anko-sensei, Ino said, sounding slightly worried as she looked at Naruto. What happened to him? Is he okay? Yeah, Anko said, popping her en and wincing. Reaching up to rub it, she sighed, thankful that she still had enough pain going on in her body to block out the burning of the curse seal. Orochimaru just used a forced sleep seal on him. He should be up and about in a few hours. Sore, drained, but alive and able to finish the exam. Actually, he should probably, Bird Mask started to say, before Anko see him off. Go back to the camp with his teammates, wake up, and proceed to the tower. This has nothing to do with him, Anko narrowed her eyes, her K-intent flooding his senses. Or do I have to see your tongue out and feed it to the giant ligers in this place? Right, Bird Mask said weakly, handing Ino a pack of medicine. Here, use this, should help him recover. I'm going on patrol. That said, he rushed off into the trees. But, which way is the tower? Ino asked, blinking as she and Shino lugged Naruto up. Anko blinked, then glanced at Bear Mask, who coughed and discreetly pointed in the proper direction. Oh yeah, that way. So, you head that way and make sure to look out for the man-eating fly traps, giant centipedes, and the poison gas. I'm pretty sure the giant ligers, snow sand, the rousers, and the bursts of fire are in the other direction. I think so, too, Bear Mask said before tossing the genin a pouch. Just in case you need some more medical supplies. Or a compass. Thanks. Ino managed, blinking. What's a rouse? Rats of unusual size, Bear Mask answered blandly. They're about the size of a medium-sized dog. Then nodding, he glanced at Anko and took off after his partner. The older woman stood there staring at the three and then looked into the forest. When he wakes up, tell him. No, never mind. That said, she jumped into the trees, knowing that she would speak with Naruto after all of this was over. More important, however, was the silent promise she made to herself. Orochimaru would pay dearly for hurting Naruto. If it cost her life, he would pay. Looks like you had some trouble, Orochimaru-sama. Landing adroitly, or at least as adroitly as a man in Orochimaru's condition could, he grinned, taking his black and red cloak from the young man. Kakuku, there were a few spirited ones, Kabuto-san. You always say that, a new voice said from the shadows of the trees. He isn't going to be happy. We are behind schedule. Sasori-san, it couldn't be helped, Orochimaru said as Kabuto began healing him, glancing at the squat figure that emerged from the trees draped in its own cloak and bamboo hat. It seems you suffered some serious damage this time, Kabuto said, his voice mildly interested. You need to be more careful, Orochimaru. After all, you are not immortal yet. Not all of us can have as handy a talent as you, Orochimaru said in response as Kabuto shifted to his cheek, healing it within an instant. But I am touched at your concern, Sasori-san. Ninjutsu is an art, Sasori said blandly, his tail swaying slightly. Art is wonderful in any form, and it must be preserved. You are the perfect choice for that. Yes, of course, Orochimaru said, shifting his attention to the nearly finished medic. Kabuto-san, what do you know about Uzumaki Naruto? Not much. I have had to rely on what I've overheard, the medic admitted, finishing his treatment before producing a deck of nin cards. Flicking one out, he applied his chakra and frowned slightly. He just became a genin this year, been assigned as an apprentice to Mitarashi Anko, then as a member of Team 10. This is interesting, he's managed 2 B-ranked missions and 1 A-ranked mission. All completed successfully. Kikuku, I'm not surprised, Orochimaru said, picking up his own bamboo hat from a tree branch. Do you have something I should add? Kabuto asked, raising an eyebrow in curiosity. No, Orochimaru said, a pleasant smile on his face. He's just a genin. Interesting, but nothing worth keeping up on. So, did you make contact before you were distracted? Sasori asked impatiently, eyes darting to the trees from which Orochimaru had just come. We'll have our answer in a month, Orochimaru responded with a delighted chuckle. Right after the nin exams. What about the Ichibi Jinchuriki? Kabuto asked, placing his nin cards back into a pouch. He was just as Yura-san said, short-tempered and dangerous. I don't think there are actually many teams left in this exam that he hasn't Orochimaru said, lowering his bamboo hat to shade his eyes. I almost feel sorry for whoever has to capture him. Zetsu-san said that there was a person we should visit in Rock, Sasori said after a protracted pause, before setting off at a slow pace. Kabuto-kun, can you keep an eye on someone for me? Orochimaru said, turning to the younger ninja. Of course Orochimaru-sama, there's a Uchiha here, you'll know which one. Keep an eye on him and let me know how he develops, Orochimaru explained before lowering his voice. Keep an eye on Naruto-kun as well. That said he turned and followed after the impatient-seeming Sasori. What are you hiding? Sasori asked after a moment. Kikuku, what makes you think I'm hiding anything? Because you have a habit of hiding things. So do you, Orochimaru responded lightly. Which is why we work so well together. Don't you agree, Sasori-san? For the moment, Orochimaru-san. I'm so glad we understand each other. Yamanaka Ino, for all of her attitude and the annoyance she felt for Naruto, was worried. According to Anko, Naruto had fought and held off an S-ranked criminal, which was honestly impressive, but that he had been hurt. Yet, ever since he had woken up, he had rejected any sort of help, instead preferring to soldier on through whatever pain he felt. Why do boys try so hard? Ino wondered silently, knowing that if it had been her she would have taken any help she could get. Especially after fighting such an insanely powerful enemy. Naruto-kun, maybe we should take a break. No time, Naruto said firmly, glancing at her. I promise I'm tougher than I look, Ino-chan. Ino nodded, relenting, and he turned away. Biting her lip to keep quiet, Ino watched as one of his hands absently strayed to his stomach. It was one of her moments of uncanny insight that led her to understand his actions. He was acting strong for them. Thinking back to the last time they were on a mission, she realized this was how he always acted when hurt. He had been poisoned, hurt. And he had stood up, shoved it all behind a mask of strength. Why? So that they could lean on him, could survive. Oi, Shino, how much further? Naruto suddenly asked, his voice happy and light. I really wanna hurry up and have some Ichiraku ramen. We will arrive shortly, just as soon as we clear these trees, Shino answered without turning, tilting his head slightly. Team 7 appears to be approaching as well. Naruto blinked, then snorted. Who'll get there first? We'll arrive at the same time, Shino explained, finally turning to glance back at them. It appears that this will be a tie. No way I'm tying with that prick, Naruto grumbled. Come on, we can outroo. No, Ino said firmly. See the other blonde off. Noticing his surprise, she fixed him with her most intimidating glare. You are hurt, it doesn't matter if we tie. You staying healthy is more important. Naruto blinked, staring at her for a moment before he grinned slightly. Aha, but, come on, we can do it easy. Besides, I told you I was fine. Not hurt at all really, just stiff. Ino opened her mouth to retort, to explain just how hurt he was and would be if he didn't listen to her, only to have him dart off ahead. Speeding up, she followed, joining Shino in the pursuit of their teammate. Naruto, for his part, seemed to be having a great old time, performing acrobatics and laughing as he went. I can't believe he's doing that, Ino muttered, eyes narrowed in annoyance. He just got done fighting an S-ranked criminal, and now he's jumping around like an insane frog. Maybe it is as he says, Shino said. After all, he does seem to recover more quickly than most people. No, Ino said, shaking her head. He's hiding it, but I know he's hurt. He did the same thing on our last mission. He's hiding whatever's left over from that fight, so we won't get distracted. You may have a point, Shino said seconds before they reached the edge of the trees, and the tower came into view. However, it is a pointless concern now. Ino nodded, and, zeroing in on a now jacketless Naruto, darted toward him. The orange-clad idiot looked up, of course, a smile plastered on his face. Oi! About time you guys got here. Are you trying to get yourself K? Ino snapped, and huffed, producing the medical pouch that she had been given. Honestly, why do you have to be so stubborn? But I'm Finn. If you say that one more time, I'm going to beat you senseless with my sword. Ino shouted. Naruto blinked, then cleared his tea, nodding toward the other group. You do know that Sasuke is hurt, right? And that Sakura-chan is all over him. Ino didn't even glance, focusing, instead, on him, looking for wounds that he was trying to hide. And, I don't care how much you say otherwise, you have to be hurt. Naruto blinked, then stared at her for a moment before reaching up to scratch his head. But, Sasuke. Naruto, you're more important, Ino said briskly, not paying attention to what she was saying. Sensing surprise from him, she stopped her search for wounds and looked at him curiously. What was with that look? He looked as if someone had just knocked the air out of him. What? And nothing, Naruto managed weakly and then, flushing, which was strange to see, he coughed. My side sorta hurts. I knew it, Ino shouted, but she couldn't help but wonder why he kept looking at her like she had just offered him free miso ramen for the rest of his life. We should enter the tower now, Shino said, crouching next to them. Team 7 has already entered. Ino grimaced, her fingers leaving the side Naruto had exposed for her. If they failed, it would be her fault. Well, not really, it'd be. Oi. Let's go, Naruto said, hopping to his feet before helping Ino up. If we fail, then we fail, but at least we got to kick some A. Having said his piece, he put his hands behind his head and turned, heading for one of the doors to the tower, whistling. Ino blinked, surprised at the sudden shift in attitude. For that last few days, Naruto had been frightening in his intensity, yet now he was back to how he was when he had first joined the team. Glancing at Shino, as if seeking his opinion, she was startled to find him looking at her with a raised eyebrow. What? Nothing, Shino said, and then, nodding, motioned for her to lead the way to the door where the insane boy was waiting impatiently. Entering the hall together, Team 9 paused, then blinked, looking around. It was a massive hall, with 2 railed upper levels running the entire length. Most impressive of all were the 2 massive hands set into what appeared to be a modified ram hand seal, which towered behind the array of sensei and the Hokage himself. Ino wobbled at the knowledge of what she was now seeing. Kami, so many important people. Recovering quickly, she hurried to join Naruto and Shino as they found a place among the other genin present. Looking around nervously, she didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified at seeing just the 12 genin. Shifting her attention away from them, she looked forward once more to stare at the gathered ninja, or, more specifically, to stare at the masked jonin who was causally standing slightly in front of the Hokage with his arms crossed. First off, congratulations on passing. And, I'm happy to see that none of you met with the rouses, the masked ninja finally said. Quote. Or the tribe of nymphomaniac Kanoiki, he added, his eye curving up in amusement. Ino blinked, then her forehead, while most of the males coughed or made odd noises at that announcement. Ino was, at least, relieved to see that the Hokage looked less than amused, which was proven when he cleared his tea and the masked man laughed, rubbing the back of his head nervously. Aha, well, anyway, congratulations. The Hokage will now explain the third exam, so listen closely, okay? Stepping aside, the man carefully slipped a red book out of his pocket and began to blush. Ino rolled her eyes and focused instead on the dignified man dressed in white and red. He stared at them in silence, as if appraising them, blowing the occasional smoke ring into the air. Ino began to chew a fingernail, worried that he was going to fail them for being the last to enter or something of the like. Instead, he smiled, removing his pipe to speak. I must say, I'm impressed. The 12 of you, out of this year's entire exam, have made it this far. Normally, we have, at most, 9 examinees remaining, but this year we have so many talented shinobi. Nodding, the old man's smile faded, his tone growing serious. Now, I must explain the true purpose of this exam. Make no mistake, this is a test for those who will become Chunin. But, it is also something else. Oi, what the hell are you talking about? Naruto shouted in irritation. Don't interrupt, the Hokage said, fixing the blonde with an intimidating glare before continuing his speech. This exam is a substitute for open war between the shinobi villages. Our nations are tied through peace and non-aggression treaties and, thus, we shinobi cannot openly fight like generations past. Therefore, this test evolved. What does that mean? A girl with brown hair done up in buns asked. Each of you from now on, will be fighting as representatives of your villages. In 1 month, there will be daimyo and influential businessmen from different nations here to observe this final exam. If the strength of a village is shown, they gain more clients and defeat their enemies by stealing business. If a village is shown to be weak, then they lose. Yeah, well, why do we have to risk our lives in battle? Kiba shouted angrily. The strength of a country is based on the strength of its hidden village, and the strength of a hidden village is based on its ninja, the Hokage explained seriously. And, a shinobi's true strength is born only through life-risking battles. I don't care what it is. Just hurry up and tell us what this life-risking battle entails, a frighteningly plain-looking, red-haired boy said. It entails just that, the Hokage said, unimpressed with the child. You will fight with your lives and your country's prestige on the line. Take the month between now and the finals to train, rest, or however you wish to prepare. After that month is up, you will be brought back to the village and to the stadium for the final exam. Quote. So, that's it, Naruto said in amazement. No way. Yes, unless any of you care to ask a question, that's it. Oi, what about these scrolls with our names on them? Kiba asked, holding his up. Ah, yes, place those in the box being passed around. After that, you're free to go. Ino blinked and began looking frantically for her paper, fearful that she might have lost it. Finding it, she breathed a sigh of relief and dropped it into the box along with Shino and Naruto. Breathing a sigh of relief at finally having this stage done, she turned to say something to Naruto, only to find him already rubbing his hands together in anticipation. I'm going to get Anko to so totally. She is our sensei, Shino said calmly, walking away from the two. She will train us all equally. Naruto stuck his tongue out at the boy's back, then sighed, putting his hands behind his head. Aha, well, Ichiraku Ramen, here I come. Ino shook her head, running her fingers through her formerly lustrous hair. Ugh, it was oily and tangled. She probably stank, too. Correction, she knew she did. After all, it wasn't like she could have risked a bath during the second exam. Right, first thing when she got home was a shower and then a long, warm bubble bath. Oi, Ino. Blinking, Ino came out of her thoughts to see her whiskered teammate staring at her oddly. What? Are you hungry? Naruto asked, smiling at her. Oi, 'cause I am, and I realized that you hardly ever eat, and this exam really see back on how much food we had anyway, so, if you want, you can come with me and get some food. Ino blinked, then chuckled, walking to his side. Sure, but I'm just having a salad. I have to watch my figure, after all. Then, I really gotta wash my hair. You know, don't hit me or anything, Naruto said, glancing at her curiously, but, I've been wondering how you ever decided that 3 feet of hair was a good idea. The same way you decided that orange was a good color, Ino retorted, performing a dramatic hair flip. And I'll have you know that guys find long hair very attractive. Oi. But I like short hair, Naruto said, a mischievous grin appearing on his face. And, besides, guys also like, but I don't see you working on that department yet. Ino froze in surprise, then flushed brightly. I'm going to KU. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.